Lukhona, very good afternoon to you. I'm wondering if your feelings have changed at all since you penned that open letter.
Good afternoon, Tembegile. No, I think my feelings have been amplified, particularly given the other pieces that are sort of, gauging the government response, critiquing the government response, and the calls by the unions as well for the closure of schools. And I think there's a growing voice in society. I mean, we even saw the South African Youth Council coming out on the question of schools. And I think also as we had the ministers during the week unpack some of the regulations, particularly around taxis and 100% loading for short distance, you get the sense that it is more about the practicalities. I think the Minister of Transport was probably the most sincere, because he said it just makes financial sense for the industry to load 100%. And we do know that it is not about the science anymore. It is now about the economics for the taxi industry, because government has failed over the years, of course, to formalize, has failed to subsidize that particular industry, and therefore now they are under pressure to actually give in to the demands of the taxi industry. So I think my feelings when I penned the letter and what has subsequently transpired over the week, I am much more convinced about some of the claims and demands that I made to the president.
What say you then, Lukhona, to people who say, yes, it may have been a mainly financially motivated decision to allow taxis who are traveling locally to load at full capacity, but the reality is we live in a country where if those thousands of taxi drivers were unable to support themselves properly financially, it would be a situation where the government, for example, would not be able to provide them with the sort of money needed.
So I think, Tembegile, the biggest problem we've had with this lockdown period since it started on the 26th of March has just been a weak social relief response. And of course, in some instances that has been compromised by questions of corruption, particularly in dispensing food parcels. But I think insofar as thinking about industries that we may say that are precarious jobs for those who are in them. So if you stop going to work, you stop earning an income. There wasn't a lot of creativity on the side of government, and a lot of those people were left to the dictates and the whims of the Solidarity Fund. And we know that the Solidarity Fund, whilst it was seeded by with government money at 150 million rands, much of it relies on donations, much of it relies on people giving, but also the mandate of the Solidarity Fund is very expansive. Some of it has to do with the public health response, some of it has to do with social relief, some of it has to do even with thinking about areas of research and development in the space of fighting the pandemic. So there wasn't a clear, articulated government response for those people in precarious jobs, in the informal sector, in the taxi industry, and so on. That issue on its own needs to be rectified, because as we are moving towards the peak in our infections and our community transmissions continue to persist in the way that they are, it might be important, as you are saying, parts of India now are going back to a lockdown. It might be possible that even here in South Africa, provinces such as KwaZulu-Natal, Western Cape, Eastern Cape, and Gauteng will find themselves going back to a hard lockdown, and we will still have to address the question of social relief. So I don't think we should act irresponsibly because we don't have social relief packages and then risk more people contracting the virus and risking more families being in danger, because the people who take taxis are of a particular social class, and we know that in the areas that they are in, some of them aren't able to social distance, and therefore they become enabling vectors of the virus, even at a higher rate in community.
And those are the same people, Lukhona, who will say to you and I that often when we say shut everything down until the worst is over, we ignore the fact that they're already so poor that they don't have another week to wait for what you, as you've highlighted, that poor social assistance response to eventually come through. A lot of them, I remember, even in levels 4 and 5, were saying, look, send us back. We're willing to take the chance because we've got children to feed and we cannot wait any longer.
No, absolutely, Tembegile. We must be alive to the chronic levels of poverty in our country, the questions of inequality. But, you know, when you work around this dichotomy around saving lives and livelihoods, in a moment of emergency and the pandemic as we are facing now, the most basic ingredient is to ensure that people have access to food. And I mean, in countries like Vietnam, where they knew what the staple products are for their people, they even put up rice ATMs just for people to be able to go and with a plastic and fetch rice so that at home they can go back and cook. That's why I'm saying our problem with this lockdown is that we didn't have imagination on social relief responses that in one instance take away the responsibility away from the corrupt local government officials that we do know there is persistent corruption at that level, and the ugly head of corruption reared its head when food parcels had to be moved and communities had to be accessed. But also thinking imaginatively about cash transfers. It takes us a long time to deliver to people. Just the 350 rands COVID-19 social relief special grant took a very long time before it could reach some recipients. Some recipients are still without that 350 rand. So there's something in our governance systems that needs to move a tad bit quicker, and I would hope that imagination would come from the lawmakers themselves. Of course, people want to go back to Mbegile and make an income, but the reality is that we then forget how many more people are out of work. We've been talking about 10 million and rising as per some reports that have come. We don't talk about the people that have lost work. I mean, just today we are seeing the skirmish that is playing itself out in Cape Town with people trying to erect informal dwellings because they have lost work, they're no longer able to pay their rent, and they have nowhere to sleep. And therefore now they want to find some level of home where they can hide their heads during the night, even if it's a rudimentary structure. So the reality is that while some people want to go back and make an income, the science behind community transmission, the science behind coronavirus and how it spreads remains fixed. And what we should be worried about as a country, rather than sending back people to make them what I call COVID-19 bouncers, and take a chance with them and dice with their lives, we must as a country be thinking how best do we respond socially so that people have that guarantor that they will have food during a lockdown.
Final question to you then. The argument has been that this is uncharted territory. No government in the world was prepared for the scale of what COVID-19 has done to economies globally. How sympathetic are you of the government's position?
Well, you know, you sympathize because it is a novel coronavirus. Nobody has seen something like this. But then you look around the world and you see the agility in governments in New Zealand, in Vietnam, in Norway, in parts of Iceland and so on. And you realize that different responses are possible. You see how Kenya was very quick to respond in terms of social relief using their payment system in M-Pesa. 208,000 households which were hardest hit in the 3 counties that implemented a hard lockdown. You look to India in some states and what they did, even giving gas cylinders to poor households that they knew would be hardest hit by the pandemic. So you then wonder whether the problem is that the coronavirus is novel or there is a problem of agility, of foresight and of vision within our government. And I think my inclination is more towards the latter.
All right, Lukhona Mnguni, political analyst, thank you so much for speaking to us this afternoon.